I call to order the 805th meeting of the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. This committee will continue with agenda item 5. The floor is once again open to members of the task force for Finland to pose the questions regarding Cluster 2 to the representative of the state party and for the representative of the state party to reply to those questions. Ms. Rosemary Cases, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning, everybody. I'd like to thank the Finnish delegation for providing those written answers to the procedural safeguards for me. That's excellent, and they will be shared with the task force and committee members. Because I have the microphone, I'm going to just change things up a little bit and move to Article 19 and then come back to my other questions. The committee understands that there's insufficient accessible housing in the community, that personal assistance can be restricted to certain days and times, that the provision of support services are inequitable across welfare services counties and vary significantly depending on whether they are provided under the Disability Services Act or the Social Welfare Act. These are just a few of the issues we've heard, and we understand that this situation is getting worse with funding cuts. The result is that children and adults with disabilities have no alternative but institutionalised living. This is the only option provided by service providers because of limited resources and because there are insufficient accessible housing and support services to realise the right to live independently in the community. Can the delegation inform the committee whether this issue is recognised as undermining the rights in Article 19 of the Convention, and whether it's being monitored and assessed, and whether there are measures to address this situation?
Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. If you allow me, first I would like to give floor to the Ministry of the Interior to reply to one of the questions presented yesterday, and then we have the Ministry of Social Affairs and Health, please.
Thank you. To supplement some of the answers that I provided to the committee yesterday, I would like to say a few words. The number of quota refugees, it was noted that during the government's program, we have 500 persons per year. Now, the figure during the previous government was 1,000, and before that, during government programs, that was around 750. Now, the Parliament always has the final call. The Parliament exercises its budgetary powers and decides on the quota. The relative share of disabled persons has been 10%. So 10% is actually the so-called medical quota in which disabled persons are counted in. So their relative share has not diminished in spite of the decrease in the total number of quota refugees. Now then, if you allow me, I would like to say a few words about disabled persons in rescue services. This is something that we touched upon yesterday. I would like to tell you briefly about preparedness, about civil defense shelters, evacuations and emergency announcements, and how disabled persons are taken into account. I will try to be as brief as possible due to time constraints, but I believe that this information would be useful for the committee. In Finland, preparedness relies on an operating model for comprehensive security, in which vital functions of society are safeguarded through cooperation between the authorities, businesses, organizations, and citizens. The functional capacity of society and its ability to provide services to the population are one of society's vital functions, which are always also safeguarded during incidents and emergencies. And for that, we have adopted the general security strategy for society. Now, focusing on rescue services then as a piece in that entity, the Ministry of the Interior coordinates the preparedness of rescue services in Finland, and preparedness refers to preparing in advance for major accidents, crises, and even war. The rescue departments of the well-being services counties have an important role in preparing for major accidents and incidents. Rescue authorities provide overall leadership in rescue situations due to storms and floods, and provide support for other authorities. Emergency planning by individuals form part of society's resilience. Emergency planning by individual assists the authorities in times of crisis, since resources do not suffice to help all those who need help and must be allocated to the most urgent cases. The ministry has included information about emergency planning by individual in Finnish Sign Language on its website. In Finland, non-governmental organizations also play an important role in ensuring preparedness and handling a number of emergencies. Persons with disabilities as a special group are taken into account in preparedness exercises. 94% of the preparedness plans of municipal social services departments have taken into account the continuity management of services for persons with disabilities. If I then move to civil defense shelters, the Rescue Act lays down provisions on civil defense shelters, for example, construction obligations, upkeep, and structural and other requirements. Accessibility requirements related to construction are included in the construction legislation. Now, we have adopted three guides. The Ministry of the Interior have adopted 3 guides, one dealing with emergency plan, the second one with introduction and use of civil defense shelters, and the third one, the maintenance and inspection of civil defense shelters. In all of these guides, the rights and the situations of the disabled persons have been taken into account very carefully. And if I turn to evacuations, then the Rescue Act includes powers for rescue officials for emergency evacuations of persons and property by order of the rescue authority due to a fire or other accident or imminent threat thereof. The Ministry of the Interior is responsible for coordination of preparedness with other officials and administrations, especially with the Ministry of Health and Social Affairs. And last year, the Ministry of the Interior published instructions for planning and carrying out evacuations. The guidelines have been prepared in broad-based cooperation, and the main points are accessible in Finnish and Finnish-Swedish Sign Language. The draft of the instructions were circulated for comments in the public, and the disability organizations had a possibility to comment on the draft. Now, the guidelines are part of a broader communications package of independent preparedness in 2002 and 2004, the aim of which is to strengthen the psychological resilience of all population groups to crisis and competence in independent preparedness. According to the guidelines, vulnerable people have been taken into account in the planning and implementation of evacuations. In civil defense situations, if evacuation is necessary, they will be targeted especially at those in a vulnerable position, for example, disabled people. Now then, the Rescue Act contains key provisions on preparing for civil protection. The Act obliges care institution operators and those providing service and assistance living in residential units to draw up an evacuation safety plan. Now, as far as emergency announcements are concerned, the Act of Emergency Warnings, Section 6 states that emergency warnings must also be issued in the Sami languages if dangerous incidents or their impacts concern the Sami homeland. Under the Act, the authorities must issue press releases in all Sami languages spoken in Finland. Emergency warnings in Sami are available on the radio. The Finnish National Broadcast Company is prepared to read emergency warnings on the radio in the Sami languages. This is perhaps where I will conclude now. Thank you.
We have that. Thank you very much. Could we have that in writing, please?
Of course.
Good morning. I can start answering to questions regarding Article 19. So as I stated yesterday, when a person becomes a client to social services, the social service professionals will assess the person's situation and draw a client plan and design the service package that best suits for the person. And this is done in cooperation with the client, and the leading principle is the best interest of the client. And in this assessment process, the questions regarding the housing services are also dealt with. And with regard to the housing and related services, the trend has long been towards developing individual housing so that the rights of the persons with disabilities to independent housing and the necessary help and support are promoted. And this means minimizing and, in a long run, completely discontinuing a long-term institutional care and improving availability of services that supports the smooth running of everyday life for persons with disabilities in their own immediate environments, such as services that support living at home and other support that strengthens their own resources. There are few institutional care for persons with disabilities in Finland anymore, as the institutional care for persons with disabilities has been dismantled widely, and more personalized housing services have been introduced. At the end of 2024, there were 341 persons in institutional care in long term. And the new Act on Disability Services will abolish institutional housing for children with disabilities. The new Act contains provisions under which the possibility of a child with disabilities to live with his or her family must be supported by services regardless of the time of the day. However, if parents consider that the child cannot live at home despite the help and support provided, the child's living can be arranged outside the home on the basis of the Disability Service Act. And under the new act, the living of a child with a disability outside the home can no longer be arranged in an institution, but as a family care or in a group home with a maximum of 7 persons. And the purpose of the new act is to safeguard the equality, inclusion, and independent living and the right to self-determination of all persons with disabilities. The provisions of the new act on housing service enables versatile housing solutions and the related assistance and support according to the individual needs of the person with disability. So in practice, a person with a disability live in their own homes in a rental or ownership based manner. Services can be brought to their homes in a normal housing stock, and a housing service or support can also be arranged in a group housing. But even when a person receives 24 hours housing service in a housing unit, for example, the person has his or her own dwelling in that unit, which includes toilets and kitchens. And the services are organized according to individual needs, and the housing service must support the realization of the right to self-determination, inclusion, and privacy. And when housing service is granted, the right to self-determination means, for example, that a person with disabilities can, as a rule, determine their own daily rhythm. The number of personnel must be scaled and shifts must be arranged according to the needs of the residents while taking into account labor legislation. And this must be ensured both in group housing and in services brought to an ordinary private home. The right to self-determination is realized well when services are flexible according to the person's schedule and not vice versa. And the European Social Fund project funding supports the development of a good operating models for housing support that meets individual needs in the well-being service counties in 2025 till 2028. And also regarding the funding, I would point out that with the entry into force of the new Disability Service Act, funding for disability services has been increased by approximately 30 million euros per year. And I would also like to point out that the disability organizations and other stakeholders have been actively involved in preparation the proposals, such as the new Disability Service Act, which has entered into force. For example, in 2021 and 2022, the ministry organized a number of consultative events, total around 100 events and workshops. And regarding the scope of application in 23 and 24, the ministry began the preparation by hearing proposals, wishes, and views of the stakeholders, including a number of disability organizations. And this year there has been a consultation round and a separate hearing for a member organizations of Disability Forum. So the statement that disability organizations would have not been able to take part of the legislative process is not true. And I will shift the turn to Ministry of Environment. Thank you.
I'd really like to stop this here and just, there's 2 points I'd like to make and then I'd like to move on. If there's other information that you want to pass on in writing with regards to this issue, we will accept it. One of the things that I want to point out, though, is what you're saying is that you're recognizing group homes as independent living. I would suggest that you engage with the general comment on Article 19 and look at how where the committee stands in terms of the role of group homes. They can be as institutionalized as a large institution, and the guidelines on deinstitutionalization will also be very informative for you. I now want to go to what I think is a very confusing issue, and it also covers several of the articles of the convention, primarily 18, 19 and 28. There's unclear jurisdictional responsibilities between Åland, Finland and Sweden regarding the financing and responsibility for care and social insurance eligibility for people with disabilities from the Åland Islands placed across borders, mainly in Sweden. Finland views these people as having emigrated from Finland, therefore excluding them from social insurance and other citizenship rights. This goes to the heart of the rights of persons with disabilities, liberty of movement and not to be deprived of their nationality arbitrarily or on the basis of disability. The genesis of this situation is the lack of Swedish language, social services, and accessible housing options for people with disabilities from the Åland Islands. What are you doing to resolve these jurisdictional responsibilities and to deliver Swedish language, social services, and housing options? I'd like this to be considered from the Finnish government and the Åland Islands.
Thank you. The autonomous Åland Islands have its own jurisdiction on certain issues, and therefore our government is not necessarily in a position to reply to all elements of this question. So basically we need to consult the government of the Åland Islands and provide a reply in written. But now I'm looking at the Ministry of Social Affairs and Health, those parts which belong to our jurisdiction. So if you are able to reply those questions. Thank you.
I will remind you that Finland is the holder of the obligations under the convention.
Thank you. Regarding this specific question, we are aware of this and we have discussions with Åland Islands. So the discussions are ongoing and we are dealing with this situation at the moment. Thank you.
I'd now like to go back to Article 14. The committee is aware of legislation in the State Party, such as the Mental Health Act and the Act on Special Care for Persons with Intellectual Disabilities, allow for involuntary detention and treatment on the basis of impairment. Can the delegation explain what measures are being taken to prohibit involuntary detention and treatment on the basis of impairment?
Thank you. I'm giving some time to our delegation. In the meantime, if I may, I would like to respond to a question presented yesterday and which is still pending. And this was about access to electronic identification and banking tools. This will be a short one. In terms of electronic authentication, a person can authorize another person to act on their behalf in digital public services in person or in writing, using an assistant to do so. However, Finland is in the process of implementing the EU's revamped eIDAS regulation, which includes the creation and provision of digital identity wallets. And these allow electronic and digital authentication without the use of online or banking services. And per the eIDAS regulation, the digital identity wallets shall be available to persons with disabilities on equal terms and must be accessible. And using a digital identity wallet, a person can then authorize another person to act on their behalf in digital public services using Suomi.fi services. And in the implementation of the Accessibility Directive, a national extension was also made to private sector identification services, and they were included in the scope of application of the Act. Thank you. Then I give floor to our delegation, please.
Thank you. Yesterday, I informed the committee already the situation regarding the right to self-determination legislation overall in Finland. But regarding the involuntary treatment, the Finland has an act on special care for persons with intellectual disabilities that contains provisions on involuntary special care. And this involuntary special care is used always as a last option if the person is unable to make decisions on their treatment and care and to understand the consequences of their behavior and is likely to seriously endanger their health or safety or the health or safety of others. So the legislation contains very detailed criteria for placing a person with intellectual disability to a special care. And the Act contains provisions regarding the use of restrictive measures, such as procedural provisions, the provisions on the obligation on report and notifying, on the use of restrictive measures, and the provisions of officials' legal responsibility and a liability for damages. The provisions of the official legal responsibility and liability for damages especially strengthens the legal protection of the rights of the persons with disabilities, especially in the situation of abuse of power. And the use of restrictive measures is limited only to institutional care and 24/7 care units. And the objective of those provisions is to strengthen the right of self-determination and the ability to perform independently of the persons who receive special care services, as well as to limit the use of restrictive measures to the last resort. And basically,
Thank you. I mean, I know that there have been cases before the European Court of Human Rights that date back to 2012, such as X in Finland, on the issue of involuntary detention and treatment. And there are 2 pending cases on this matter. It suggests a lack of action, and regulation is not prohibition of involuntary treatment. But I really do need to move on because I have to ask some questions now. And given the timing from the podium, we may require answers in writing. So what legislative and policy protections are in place to prevent the use of coercion restrictive practices against children and adults with disabilities in psychiatric institutions, residential and institutional services, aged care facilities, prisons, foster care, early childhood, and educational settings. What oversight mechanisms exist to monitor these areas? Does the mandate of the National Preventive Mechanism undertake monitoring based on CRPD standards and principles, including having a focus on specific harmful practices experienced by persons with disabilities? And so, regardless of the domestic law and regulation, does the NPM problematize disability-based detention, coercion, and restrictive practices? There are a number of plans that address violence against people with disabilities, such as the National Action Plan on the CRPD 2023-2027, the All-in Disability Policy and Action Plan, the Non-Violent Childhood Action Plan 2019, and the Action Plan for Combating Violence Against Women. However, when you look at these plans, they don't have a strong intersectional approach. They are aspirational or vague in their actions. They focus disability within the category of vulnerable groups. And so it is hard to identify how Finland is comprehensively understanding and addressing the unique and specific experiences of violence for the diversity of people with disability, including for women, children, and Sami with disability. Are there mechanisms which address this weakness in the policy framework? And I will now hand the floor back to the Finnish delegation or back to the chair, one of the two. You guys can sort it out.
Thank you so much, Ms. Rosemary Casey. Now the floor is open to non-task force member of the committee and one member of the task force to pose follow-up question to the representative of the Finland regarding cluster 2, to which the representative of the state party will reply. This is second round of back-to-back questions. Will last 25 minutes and concludes at 10:50 p.m. Miss Amalia Camillo, you have floor.
Gracias, señora presidenta.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the delegation for the answers they have shared with us. I have some questions under Cluster 2. On Article 14, I would like to know what is the current position of the state party as regards the draft additional protocol to the Convention on Human Rights in Biomedicine, the Oviedo Protocol, which of course is against or stands against the Convention on the Persons with Disabilities, specifically Article 14 and its guidelines. And my next question is, can you share with us the results of the research project on domestic violence prevalence among persons with disabilities that you had from 2021 to 2022? You mentioned this in your report in answer 108. The next question is, well, as you yourself have said, the Sterilization Law 283, 1970 is quite old, and it should urgently be repealed. So my question is whether you have any plans to do so. The next question, can you further elaborate on your explanation about the study that the Ministry of the Environment carried out regarding the housing situation for persons with intellectual disabilities? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Labran Jacob, you have floor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the delegation for their expansive answers. I want to ask a question about Article 18, and in particular, In 2023, during the fourth UPR cycle, Finland supported recommendations to ensure that undocumented migrants would have effective access to healthcare services. However, in 2024, Finland put forward a legislative proposal to restrict healthcare access to urgent care only for irregular or undocumented migrants, including migrants with disabilities. So my questions are the following. What reasons motivated the change to restrict healthcare access to urgent care only? As well, this proposal appears to mean that access to non-urgent care, including assistive products, would only be available in isolated cases. And so I'm looking for more information on what's meant by isolated cases. Finally, could you please provide an update on this legislative proposal? What has occurred since the proposal was made in 2024, and what's happening now in 2025? Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Rosemary Cases, you have floor.
I'd like to acknowledge Finland's leadership in the adoption of the Human Rights Council resolution combating discrimination, violence, and harmful practices against intersex persons. What measures have you taken at the domestic level to protect intersex children from unnecessary and deferrable medical interventions?
Mr. Martino Lorenzo, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning and greetings to the delegation of Finland. My question is whether persons with disabilities take part in the assessment of the multidisciplinary committee and that evaluation.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Excellency, you have the floor to respond.
Thank you. There were multiple questions. I believe that there were some we need to reply in written, but we will start with the Ministry of Justice and then followed by Ministry of Social Affairs and Health, please.
Thank you. Just very shortly on the NPM, the Parliamentary Ombudsman is designated as the national preventive mechanism of Finland under the optional protocol of the Convention Against Torture. And the Ombudsman does have wide powers in inspecting places where persons deprived of their liberty are held, including prisons and social healthcare institutions, military facilities, etc. And the NPM has paid special attention to the needs of persons with disabilities in these places. And the Ministry of Social Affairs and Health will continue.
Thank you. So regarding the question of the supervision of the housing services and different other units, yesterday I responded quite comprehensively on the supervision of our healthcare and social services sector, which includes the self-supervision, the role of the supervisory authorities, as well as the possibility of a patient or a client to make an objection to the care unit, and as well as to make a complaint to the supervisory authorities, and these all apply to the situations in all social and healthcare systems. So I don't repeat those comprehensively now. Regarding the Oviedo Convention, the Ministry of Social Affairs and Health has not identified particular problems regarding the draft. The draft additional protocol is in line with our national legislation, which is a Mental Health Act, and the package emphasizes the priority and development of voluntary treatment methods and the last resort of the involuntary methods, with the aim of avoiding to use them. Regarding the Sterilization Act, as I said yesterday, we have recognized that there is a need to develop the legislation, but at the moment, no legislative amendments are being prepared. Regarding the intersex people, in 2021, Finland and the Ministry of Social Affairs and Health appointed a working group that comprised the ministry officials to reform the transgender legislation. And the working group was tasked to submit necessary proposals to strengthen the right to self-determination of the intersex children in accordance with the child's best interest and personal integrity, as well as their age level and development. In their assessment, the working group found that a better knowledge base would be required to propose any legislative actions, as there were very little officially compiled information available on interventions to modify sex characteristics. And in the view of the working group, any legislative measures to ensure a better self-determination may, however, be implemented as a part of a different ongoing project that aims to strengthen the right to self-determination of the clients and patients, including the children and young people. The working group proposed a report by an authority on practices relating to measures to modify sex characteristics of intersex children. And it also proposed, among other things, to ensure that provisions of appropriate information to intersex children and their parents, and to ensure the provisions on gender diversity training to professionals working with the children. In 2023, as a part of the implementation of the National Child Strategy, the Finnish Medical Society published a good practice consensus recommendation on giving initial information, which addresses giving initial information in situations where a fetus, a newborn, or a child under age of 1 is found or suspected to be intersex. And the recommendation notes that the body of an intersex person does not, as such, require any medical interventions. And it is also noted that while certain variations of intersexuality are associated with situations regarding the medical treatment, neither intersexuality itself nor the individual features of a person's body constitute an illness or a disorder. Regarding the legislation on undocumented migrants, the current proposal was submitted to the Parliament in spring 2025, and the process is ongoing. Basically, the Act on Organizing Health and Social Services would be amended so that the well-being services counties, the City of Helsinki, and the Joint County Authority for the Hospital District of Helsinki and Uusimaa would no longer, as a rule, be obliged to organize non-urgent healthcare services to third country nationals whose stay in Finland is illegal, as referred in the Article 27, subparagraph 3 of the Aliens Act. However, the third country nationals residing illegally should be provided with essential non-urgent treatment based on the individual assessments and and this is done for every patient. And basically, the proposal has been submitted to the Parliament in spring 2005, and the process is ongoing. It is my understanding that the Parliament has not started to discuss this proposal. And regarding the studies on violence against women, yes, I mentioned that yesterday that in March 2022, a study on domestic violence experienced by the people with disabilities was published. The research report is available in Finnish, and the abstract is available in English, and we can send this to your committee later on. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I would like to give the floor to the Ms. Rosemary Cases, a member of the task force, to follow question.
Thank you very much, Chair. I would just like to give a little addendum to my question on the NPM, and I'd like to direct it to the National Human Rights Institute just to get their reflections on the NPM. The Parliamentary Ombudsman's reports very much focus on the domestic law and the regulation and the status of the detention or placement of people with disability within facilities, rather than the specific instances of disability and harmful practices. So for the NPM question, I'd like to hear the views of the NHRI on whether the NPM problematise disability-based detention, coercion, and restrictive practices. I don't have the scenario. How long have we got?
Until 10:50
Can I hand the floor to the NHRI then to hear their response?
Yes, please.
Very much for the question. The short answer to this question is that the NPM takes into account the obligations and the standards of the CRPD in its inspection work. And when the Parliamentary Ombudsman carries out inspections in other facilities than closed facilities, the staff members take into account the standards of the NPM. Thank you.
Mr. Marcus Shepherd, you have floor.
Thank you, Chair. As Task Force Coordinator, I would like to follow up on two questions that were asked. The first is the question by my colleague Amalia Gamio on the Oviedo process. My question is the state delegation aware of the position this committee has taken based on the CRPD convention on the process with respect to the additional protocol to the Oviedo Convention? Your answer only pertained to the compliance of the Oviedo process with national law and did exclude the question of compliance with the CRPD. And I would also like to follow up on the question by my colleague Laverne Jacobs. She also asked for the rationale behind the current legislative efforts to restrict healthcare for persons deemed illegally resident in Finland. If we could have some clarifications on these 2 points. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellency, you have the.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. As regards the additional protocol to the Oviedo Convention, yes, the government is fully aware of your committee's position in this regard. And in Finland, when this Oviedo additional protocol has been work in progress, we have held consultation rounds, both in written, and we have also consulted in a meeting our disability organizations. And we are fully aware of your committee's position, as well as the statements and positions of our national and also European disability organizations. And I must say that the government has been heavily lobbied. So we have been fully informed about this one. And I would say that it was probably because of Finland's initiative that the Council of Europe, and particularly this Committee on Bioethics at the Council of Europe, started to look at the more fuller package, because it is at the moment, it is not only this additional protocol to the Oviedo Convention, but there is also a recommendation, and there is an explanatory report which complements and provides a fuller picture why this additional protocol is needed in the European context. Thank you. Then I have one clarifying question, and that was a question asked by Mr. Corporan Lorenzo about this multidisciplinary committee. We didn't quite catch it, that reference was to which committee and whether it is mentioned in our periodic report, because we would like to very much reply to that question. But now I will give floor to our delegation, please.
Well, thank you. So our head of delegation already responded to the Oviedo process. So I will answer to the second part of the question regarding the legislation on undocumented migrants. The rationale behind the legislation is, again, the state budget situation, and we have to find solutions. How can we balance the state budget? And on the other hand, this also belongs to Ministry of Interior, and there are reasons about the migration. But one aim of the legislation is to give a signal that Finland is not an attractive place for the undocumented migrants. Thank you.
Any further replies coming from the delegation? Yes, please.
Thank you. I would like to get back to the physical restrictions in our education system, mostly in early childhood education and care, and pre-primary and basic education. Since our acts on early childhood education and care and basic education does not regulate the conditions on or procedures for physically restraining a pupil, restrictions of fundamental rights may only be applied in individual cases under sections 4 and 5 of chapter 4 of the Criminal Code as acts permitted in self-defense, or in a state of necessity and only when less restrictive measures are not possible. A follow-up review is carried out of the situation, always including an assessment of what kind of educational and healthcare services are needed afterwards. And the review may also consider the ability of the pupil or staff to continue the school day, as well as any possible disciplinary measures under the Act, Basic Education Act. And monitoring after situation is also very important, and appropriate documentation of the use of restrictive measures is, of course, essential to ensure the fundamental rights such as dignified treatment and personal liberty and integrity and safety should have been safeguarded. And reporting and documentation of such situations follow the employer's guidelines. This means usually municipalities. The Finnish National Agency for Education prepared this guidance material precisely in response to the observations made by legality supervisors. And the aim is to draw attention to the protection of children's fundamental rights and of providing teachers with information on lawful practices. The material which has been drawn up makes it clear that physical restraint may only be used as a last resort and only if a pupil poses a danger to themselves, to others, or to property. And it describes the measures that a teacher or other school staff members may take strictly as a last resort, as I said before, when immediate intervention is required and the harmful action cannot be prevented by any other means. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I would like to thank the expert and the delegation of Finland. Now we will have a 10-minute break time and reconvenes at 11:05. Thank you so much.
The committee will continue with agenda item 5. Ask from the Excellency to have 2 minutes to discuss something. Thank you so much. The committee will continue with agenda item 5. The floor is once again open to members of the task force for Finland to pose questions regarding Cluster 3. I will now call upon the member of the task force to start the round of questions for Article 21 to 30, and the delegation will have the opportunity to respond immediately after the questions have been raised. Ms. Natalia Guala, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and a very good morning to the distinguished delegation and to colleagues. We'll now kick off Cluster 3 relating to the implementation of the CRPD in Finland. I'd like to start, Chair, with Article 20. This relates to personal mobility of persons with disabilities. We've been discussing, as of yesterday, issues around the changes that have been introduced in recent years, both in terms of the law on services for persons with disabilities and also in relation to social well-being laws and policies around decentralization of social services of both standards. And I'd like to ask the delegation to explain to the committee exactly how those changes have had an impact on accessible transport being offered to persons with disabilities in terms of changes that might have been made to access to those transportations, and to what extent is it guaranteed that the decentralization of transport services can properly respond to requirements in all areas in Finland to the needs of persons with disabilities, and that quality transportation is maintained throughout that change process. Also, under this point in the area of mobility, we would like the delegation to tell us about the implementation of the European Accessibility Act, which came into force in June, and exactly how these changes have been incorporated into transport, both in terms of land and air transport, basically passenger transport across all spheres. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Excellency, you have.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. We have had Ministry of the Environment waiting for a while. They have some replies to questions asked earlier, and then I give floor to the Ministry of Transport and Communications, please.
Thank you very much. Briefly, there was a question about a study of housing situation of persons with intellectual disabilities. This was published in 2023 by Ministry of the Environment. So the study shows that the number of persons with intellectual disabilities living in institutions had been reduced by 75% between 2010 and 2022. Majority of them live independently or with family. So some 1/4 of persons live in housing service or institutions, according to this study. Part of the dwellings are built with the help of state subsidies, and mostly state subsidy goes to outside the metropolitan area where more support is needed. According to this study, because state subsidy comes together with guidelines about the design of the dwellings, according to this study, it seems to be usual that state subsidized dwellings are larger, and on the other hand, the common rooms are a bit smaller, whereas in a non-state subsidized housing, it seems to be a bit vice versa. Also, according to the interviews, there is some variation between social welfare service counties because there is much variation on the housing solution as comes to age and location, etc. But these results are from a couple of years ago. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the question. And first of all, I perhaps go a little bit in the ministers of social and social ministry. According to this transport services, the new Disability Act, Service Act, entered force in 25. And the starting point of the mobility support services is the new act that the person with the disability has the right to receive the reasonable mobility support they need if they have special difficulties in mobility and cannot independently use public transport without unreasonably great difficulties. Among other things, the Act contains provisions on what needs the service is granted for, how it is implemented, and the amount of scope of the service. Efforts have been made to take flexibility and individual needs to account, for example, in terms of quantity and implementations methods. The Ministry of Transport and Communications temporary amendments to the Act of Transport Services and the experiment to collect information on publicity support transport services have entered in the force in July, and in this experimental act gathers information on publicity support passenger transport services in northern Finland into one place. And during this experiment, the Finnish Transport and Communications Agency collect information on transport services organized by the well-being services counties of the northern part of Finland. And this agency also receives information on transport services reimbursed under the Health Insurance Act, and that is called a so-called Kela journeys, carried out in the areas of operation of the same well-being service counties. And this data collected by agencies are related to the demand, supply, and implementation of transport services. And this data is collected for 2 calendar years in 26 and 27. And then actually to this Accessibility Act, if I could get the question again.
Con mucho gusto.
Yes, with pleasure. We were asking about the entry into force of the European Accessibility Act, and particularly what changes or exactly how Finland is implementing this European Accessibility Act in the different forms of transport, of passenger transport, both in terms of public services and private public transport providers.
Thank you. This is quite a large question, and I hope if we can have in written forms, if we can come to it, because this is quite a large part of what we have done in the transport sector. So I hope if we can come with a writing comments to this.
Esperamos.
Okay, well, we will await the replies in writing then. And in any case, we would request that the assessment of information that is done regarding the impact of the changes in terms of transportation accessibility could be sent into the committee. And we would appreciate that take into account the fact that the quality of transport services for persons with disabilities should not be on any account reduced by any measures being brought into force. In view of the time, I'd like to pass on to Article 21 now and come back to the issue of the European Accessibility Act under this article, because independently of any measures that have been incorporated, the committee would like to ask whether or not DPOs and persons with disabilities in Finland know about and understand the new legislation that's brought into force with regards to audiovisual services, accessibilities, that they should include audio description, for example, and other accessibility services for people with disabilities. The same question in terms of the 2016 Accessibility Directive, which establishes that public administration should incorporate accessible services on all websites. Have these adaptations been incorporated on the websites of Finnish public services, and have steps been taken to incorporate oversight mechanisms to ensure that private service providers who are now obliged under the European Accessibility Directive are complying with that standard, and that persons with disabilities can access information in accessible formats from a digital point of view, but also in terms of other audiovisual services, in terms of digital television, for example? And to what extent can persons with disability exercise their right to report and complain about any non-compliance of those standards?
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. As regards accessible public sector websites, from the beginning of this year, Finland has had joined the supervisory authority for the EAA and the WAD to ensure the most effective implementation of accessibility in digital services in public and private sectors. Traficom, the Digital Accessibility Supervisory Authority in Finland, has carried out accessibility activities based on its supervision plan and promoting awareness of the accessibility by webinars and online courses. Each public sector body implements accessibility activities within the limits of their resources. The enforcement body has dealt with 87 accessibility complaints in 2022-24. However, not all websites nor mobile applications of public sector bodies have been made accessible in Finland. During the supervision period 2020-24, the supervision body has inspected 897 digital services from 615 different organizations in total. Not a single service has been fully compliant with accessibility requirements so far, so there is still some work to do. And the Joint Supervisory Authority for the EAA and the WAD has more resources and competencies than separate authorities to ensure the most effective enforcement of digital accessibility. Then I give to the delegation whether you would like to complement. Anybody requesting the floor? No, that doesn't seem to be the case.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. So what plans does Finland plan to put in place then in order to comply with both the 2016 directive in terms of accessibility to public websites, as well as in terms of how to incorporate the obligation under the European Accessibility Act? Is there a plan that the government is planning to put in place to meet the requirements and deal with the challenges you've just mentioned?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My understanding is regulation is there. The government is fully aware what are the requirements there, but this just requires time. It is step by step we are approaching there. And it is so important that we have this investigation, which is all the time investigating and providing results that now there is need to be more accessible and so on. So it is a work in progress, but it just takes time.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. Well, we trust that in the next review that will have been dealt with. In relation to Article 22 now, with regard to the respect for privacy of persons with disabilities, in terms of service provision in the home, personal assistance, for example, in some cases we've seen violations of the right to privacy of persons with disabilities. With the new law on services for persons with disabilities in place, what mechanisms have been set up and implemented to ensure that the assessments of the provision of services in the home for persons with disabilities fully respect the right to privacy of those people? And it would be good to know whether or not you have any kind of official register of complaints from persons with disabilities with regards to any violations of that right.
Thank you. Ministry of Social Affairs and Health, please.
Thank you. So basically, the general legislation on social welfare professionals or healthcare professionals and the rights of the patient or the rights of the social service clients are applicable here. And there's requirements that the client's privacy must be respected, and the client must be treated with the respect, and the same provisions apply for the healthcare patients. And there has a complaint mechanisms that a person can make an objection to the service unit. He or she can complain to the national supervisory authorities or the regional supervisory authorities, or the person can conduct a patient or social service ombudsperson, or also a parliamentary ombudsman is available. And as far as I know, all complaints and objections are registered, and they also can be classified according to the subject matter. Thank you.
¿Se ha dispuesto algún tipo?
Have you set up any kind of oversight mechanism under the aegis of the Ministry for Health and Wellbeing to carry out inspections to those offering those kind of services to ensure that persons with disabilities don't only have their right to privacy violated, but also have a meaningful right to reporting in an autonomous, free and informed fashion?
Ministry of Social Affairs and Health, please.
Thank you. The ministry does not conduct any inspections, but national supervisory authorities or regional authorities can. And again, there's also the self-monitoring requirement for the service provider and the service organizers. So they are the first instance who actually should monitor and should make inspections, because they are the closest to the personal assistants and they can make the changes easiest. And but we do have the possibility in our regional and state supervisory authorities to intervene with the situations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With regards to Article 23, which deals with the respect for the home and the family, for those with persons with disabilities. In Article 164 of the LOI to questions put by the committee, the State Party said that the new DSA emphasizes the possibility for children with disabilities to live in the family home and receive the necessary services accordingly. Now, in terms of the more recent changes we've been discussing since yesterday around the decentralization of social welfare services to the municipalities, and also concerning the services incorporated in this year's Act, how are you ensuring that those services in the home are given appropriately, and what follow-up is being given following the changes that have taken place over the last 2 years?
Ministry of Social Affairs and Health, please.
Thank you. The new Act will abolish the institutional housing for children, as I said today previously, and the main goal is, of course, that the child lives in home with his or her family, and in the situations in which he or she cannot live there, the family care or a group home with a maximum 7 persons should be organized. And we are monitoring the implementation of the Service Act and continuously assessing how the Act has been implemented and what challenges the implementation faces. So we are monitoring the situation. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. Allow me to reframe or broaden the question. Indeed, the aim, obviously, there is in line with the convention in that persons or children with disabilities can live with their families, and that there are no more institutions accommodating them. The question is, how have the recent cuts and budget reductions and decentralization to municipalities in terms of service provision, as well as the changes introduced in the new DSA, taking all of that into account, what elements there are going to be taken into account when you are monitoring the impact of those changes and ensuring that the services required by children in their homes are provided with no reduction of coverage, and ensuring access by all children with disabilities while you ensure maintenance of the quality of service provision? What elements are you going to be looking at in terms of the follow-up you give to these new policies?
Ministry of Social Affairs and Health.
Thank you. So the legislation is very clear in the situation that the child should live in home, and it is basically it is the starting point, and it is for the social healthcare professionals to compile the service package so that this primary purpose can be fulfilled, and it is the obligation for the social welfare services and social welfare counties to ensure that this is happening. So, thank you.
Okay, well, we'll look for perhaps to more information being provided concerning exactly how you will actually carry out that assessment at the municipality level as well. In view of the time, I'll now move to questions under Article 24, that is the right to education for persons with disabilities. once again, returning to the changes that have been brought in recent years, how is the state party ensuring that the various municipalities can ensure and maintain the provision of specialized staff teachers in terms of inclusive education across the entire country? And how are you ensuring that the quality of education isn't jeopardized with the new decentralization measures, as well as the budgetary cuts that are being brought in? And how is the state party planning to transform the segregated education centres into educational inclusive support centres in the new system in Finland?
Thank you. I give floor to the Ministry of Education and Culture, please.
Thank you for the question. Hopefully I get all these questions. If I didn't, please remind me. At first, I would like to address the question about amount of teachers, special educational needs teachers. In past couple of years, we have carried out major reforms to our learning support in early childhood education, pre-primary and basic education, and also in upper secondary school and vocational education. This last reform, considering pre-primary and basic education, entered into force 3 weeks ago, so it's very hard to assess how it will affect services in municipalities. But linked to this reform, there has been allocated funding for training more special educational needs teachers. 3 million euros, that means about 150 more special educational needs teachers. So hopefully that will address the shortage of teachers in the field. With this very big reform to pre-primary and basic education, there was also allocated funding, about 100 million euros per year. So there won't be, as I can say now, there won't be any cuts for financing the pre-primary and the basic education. And there will also be additional funding for general upper education and vocational training, 10 million euros both. So I think this cuts for financing won't be a problem when we are talking about services to learning support. And that was all the questions I remember now. So if I forget something, could you please remind me of those?
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. I'd like to add to my question and ask the representative of the Ministry of Education whether they could give us, in percentage terms, the impact that these measures have. For example, the training of 150 additional professionals. More than the additional. And percentage-wise, what is the impact that has? Also, you spoke about the additional investment in education. So what is the impact that has? And then I had a follow-up question. These professionals, are they found in regular education institutions? And then perhaps you said this, but I didn't hear the answer about what plans are there for the centers that still use segregated educational methods for them to become support centers for inclusive education or other type of center, but where segregated education for students with disabilities is not used. Thank you.
Thank you. Ministry of Education and Culture, please.
I answered the last question first. The primary principle in every situation is that the child receives early childhood education and care or pre-primary or basic education in their local childcare center or neighborhood school. So it's always an exception if a child is situated somewhere else, like in segregated system or institution. But it still is possible if it is considered to be in the best interest of the child somehow. Then the education may be provided in full-time special education or in early childhood education and pre-primary education in a special group. But that special group may be situated in that neighborhood school or in the local childcare center. But it's quite rare nowadays that children will be segregated far from home. The second question about this impact of training of 150 new special educational teachers, I must say that maybe we will get back to that in written form because I must check this impact. I can't say it right away. These new special educational teachers will probably be situated in regular institutions like in neighborhood schools or local childcare centers. That's the primary principle. But of course they have a qualification to work in specialized settings also. And we do have this state school, Valteri, which is working as this kind of a resource center for disabilities questions. They are preparing or drawing up materials and give help, and they have training courses for teachers and also they have kind of they are having this kind of courses which can be meant for also children with disabilities. Thank you.
Gracias. Volveremos tal vez.
Thank you. Maybe I'll come back to some additional point on Article 24 during the follow-up segments. But for now, I'd like to move on to Articles 25 and 26 on health and rehabilitation, respectively. In light of the amendments to the Social Welfare Law and the Law on Services for Persons with Disabilities, we have some concerns regarding access to treatment and necessary medication for persons with disabilities. So Following these recent amendments to the legislation, what measures have been taken to ensure that persons with disabilities, particularly those of lower income, can continue to have access to these medicines and treatments which they need in order to maintain their standard of living? We would also like to know if measures have been adopted to guarantee access to health services for the services that have been digitized. So, what accessibility is there in telemedicine or teleassistance services to ensure that all persons with disabilities, for example, interpretation and sign language, so that and alternative formats, and if persons that have difficulty accessing digital services have the possibility of requesting assistance in other modalities. And on Article 26, rehabilitation, we would like to ask the delegation, what is the total number of rehabilitation service providers? And how are they divided among different rehabilitation modalities? We're using the replies of the state parties to the list of issues, and we see that there was a national rehabilitation system in order to address that fragmentation and the additional barriers that persons with disabilities come across when they have to turn to different providers in order to have access to these services. So has progress been made in that national rehabilitation system? Have interinstitutional coordination measures been taken at the national level as well as at the level of counties and municipalities to guarantee that there is comprehensive rehabilitation, especially one that is community-based? Thank you.
Thank you. Ministry of Social Affairs and Health, please.
Thank you. So the starting point in healthcare is that persons with disabilities receive the services in accordance with the same rules and principles as the rest of the people. And regarding the client fees, the persons with disabilities pay for general healthcare, social welfare, and medical services in the same way as other users. The services under the Disability Service Act, on the other hand, are special services that not all citizens need, and the services referred in that act support the independent living and participation, so they are, as a rule, free of charge. But the other client fees are based on the Act and Decree on client fees in healthcare and social welfare, and the fee may be charged for the health and social services of the Wellbeing Service County from the service user unless otherwise provided by the law, and the fee may be charged according to the person's ability to pay. The fee charged for the service may not exceed the cost of providing the service. And if the Wellbeing Service County organizes the services as outsourced services, the user of the services must be charged the same fee and compensation as for the corresponding service organized by the Wellbeing Service County itself. And if the service is provided as a free service and provided with a service voucher, no client fee or deductibility may be collected from the user. And the Wellbeing Service County must issue a payment invoice to the client, and this invoice must contain several different informations, such as the information on the service which the fee is charged, and the amount of fee and the ground for the fee and services for which the fee is charged, and the contact details to the provider of additional information, and the administrative review of client fee may be requested. In the case of a flat rate payment, an administrative review may be requested on the invoice, and in the case of client fee determined on the basis of ability to pay, an administrative review may be requested on the decision on the payment. And the fee imposed for social welfare services and a fee imposed for healthcare services according to the person's ability to pay shall be reduced or waived altogether if the collection of the fee endangers the subsistence of the client or family, or the fulfillment of the statutory maintenance obligation. And for health services, the waiver or reduction of the fees apply to income-related healthcare fees, such as long-term institutional care, continuous or regular home housing. And the Wellbeing Service County must provide the client with information on the regulation concerning the reduction and non-collection of the fees, and the information shall be given to the client in a clear and understandable manner in connection with, or at least latest when the payment is collected. And regarding the question on rehabilitation, we come back to that in writing. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. We're looking forward to reply on the rehabilitation services. And I'll add to the question we had about the health service provision. This review process, the review of the tariffs or the fees or the free of charge service provision that are not covered by the law on persons with disabilities, how long has that review process been going on for? And is there a mechanism to guarantee access to these treatments or services and not to put at any risk the life or the integrity of the person?
Ministry of Social Affairs and Health, please.
Thank you. If we come back to that question later today or in writing. Thank you.
De acuerdo, volveremos entonces.
Sure, we can do that. Come back to it during the follow-up segment. Now I have questions on Article 27. Except if anyone else from the delegation would like to speak about the rehabilitation services and provide an answer to that question now.
That not be the case, so it will be Ministry of Social Affairs and Health coming back to it later.
De acuerdo.
Fine. Then on Article 27, employment. The need to ensure employment of persons with disabilities, or any person actually, is a human right. But what we notice is the low level of participation of persons with disabilities in Finland's labor market. And according to official data coming from the Finnish Statistics Office and from Eurostat, is that in Finland, only 20% of persons with disabilities are employed. And you can compare that to 70% of persons without disabilities that are employed. And estimates are that nearly 50% of persons with disabilities are economically inactive. That means they're neither seeking work nor have work, compared to 9% for persons without disabilities. So in the state party's view, what accounts for this low level of participation of persons with disabilities in Finland's labor market? And what additional measures will Finland take in order to promote the employment of persons with disabilities? We saw in the initial report and then in the replies to the list of issues some affirmative measures, but we are wondering, why are there not additional affirmative measures based on general comment number 8 of this committee, for example, on the application of Article 27?
And now I give floor to Ministry of Economic Affairs and Employment, please.
Thank you for the question. I'm Marianne Keuriläinen from the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Employment. I'm going to start with the data about the employment situation with the persons with disabilities. In Finland, we have different statistical data about the situation. So the main point is that we can't only rely on one data or source. We have to check the different data, and now we actually have also data from the labor force survey in 2033. Sorry. Okay, yes. Yes, the labor force survey. Statistics Finland collected statistics on the employment of persons with disabilities in 2022. The last data was from year 2011, so it's quite a long time from that point, but the data was collected with the help of the Galley indicator. You probably know the Galley indicator. It's a survey question. So according to this, there were about 5,093 employed persons in Finland who felt that the illness and disability restricted their activities, and this is about 33% of all employed persons. This figure was highest in the EU 20 countries. The labor force participation rate of persons with partial work ability, that is the proportion of employed person and unemployed person in the labor market among the population aged from 15 to 64, was 73% for person with with disabilities. For all people, it was 80%. Also, we have the data from the SILC data. According to this, the difference between employment rate of persons with disabilities and people with non-disabilities was 19% points, and Finland ranks 8 on this EU comparison. So I wouldn't say that the numbers is that high that you mentioned in the beginning. Also, we have registered data. The employment service statistic of the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Employment says that there were around 35,000 unemployed job seekers with disabilities and long-term illness in June 2025. So, and there are only people who had recorded about that they had some kind of disability that affects on work. But yes, we have different statistics, and unfortunately, we don't have that much register data because we have only register about the people with visual impairment. But then, what kind of assessments we have to raise the employment of persons with disabilities? There are in the Prime Minister Petteri Orpo's government program, there is also objectives to raise the employment. It includes several entries of promoting the employment of people with disabilities. Measures outlined include strengthening the receptiveness of working life, promoting more flexible opportunities for participation in working life. And under our ministry, we have a working group to find employment for people in a difficult labor market positions and increase inclusion in working life. The aim of the working group is to strengthen the receptiveness of working life, as a result of which the employment of people with disabilities or people in the difficult labor positions will increase. And there is in our working group, it consists representatives from different ministries, third sector actors such as disability organizations, and employers and employee representatives. So we work together and try to find new ways to raise the employment. And also, as was told in the opening speech, we have had this huge, the 24, this structural reform. And I would see that that can also be one good way to raise the employment of people with disabilities, that they get the more individual guidance in their own municipality. I was thinking, what was the last question of this? Or did I answer everything?
Muchas gracias por.
Thank you very much for the information. We believe it's important to note the gaps that persist regarding the participation of persons with disabilities in the labor market. And you corroborated that with this updated information, which would appreciate if you can forward it in writing as well. But you say that there is significant difference in the level of employment of people with and without disabilities, especially the percentage of persons with disabilities that are outside of the labor market. And so the question that we would appreciate further detail on is, what specific measures are there, like the one that you mentioned, the program that you have that is being launched for the promotion of the employment of persons with disabilities, whether affirmative actions will be adopted through legislation, whether pilot projects with temporary measures are going to be launched. Can you give us some examples? We don't need the whole list of them, given how much time we have, but what type of measures are there? And do they take into account Article 27 of the Convention and General Comment number 8, which could serve as an important roadmap when developing that type of initiative or policies? Thank you.
Thank you. First, we have Ministry of Economic Affairs and Employment, and after that, Ministry of Justice.
Yes, thank you for the question. At the moment, we just prepared a report on measures on strengthening the receptiveness of working life and models. We also made a research of the models used in different European countries to support hiring of people with challenging employment prospects. We have also compiled previously implemented action plans related to the same theme and try to collect the results of this. And now we have prepared an action plan for groups in difficult labor market position. And we are going to monitor an implementation of the program. So we have 14 different goals that we are going to and then yes, we are probably assess if there are any needs to amend legislation in order to promote the employment of the target group in question. Beside of this, there in the National Action Plan on the UN Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, there is one objective is that we are going to secure the competence of the different authorities and effective multidisciplinary cooperation in service, promoting the employment of persons with disabilities, so that the best workers have the information about how to support the people in the TE services. This is one that we are going to do in this government program, governmental term. And also then is one measure that we are try to support arranging working conditions, that workers know about this subsidy, because it is quite it doesn't in Finland it is really low used, this subsidy. So this is that we're going to raise the knowledge in the TE workers, professionals, about meeting the person with disabilities. And also one important is that we are going to raise the knowledge about the employees, that they know that how to recruit people who have disabilities. And this came up in the working group, that there is probably lack of information about all the subsidies and recruit systems and this kind of information. Thank you.
Si la delegación.
If the delegation would allow the interruption. The chair is telling me that we just have 5 minutes before we close this initial space for questions in the final cluster. And I wonder whether or not the chair and head of delegation would agree that the rest of this answer be dealt with perhaps in the following space we have allocated. And then I would like to leave time now for the floor to be open to questions from other members of the committee, if possible, if the chair and head of delegation agree.
Thank you so much. The floor is now open to the non-task force member of the committee and one member of the task force to pose questions to the representative of Finland regarding cluster 3, and for the representative of the state party to reply to those questions. I invite a member of the committee to raise their flaggers if they want to raise questions. Mr. Hiroshi Taman, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and a warm welcome to the distinguished delegation from Finland. My question is that we have been informed that on June the 5th, the Truth and Reconciliation process of deaf people and sign language users has been started. We were wondering if you could report on the progress of that process. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Lauren Jacob, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. And I have a question relating to Article 24 and in particular post-secondary education. And it deals with an incident that took place relating to the University of Helsinki. So in a 2023 decision in response to a complaint, the Regional State Administrative Agency issued a warning to the University of Helsinki regarding serious digital accessibility deficiencies. The Digital Services Act obliges, amongst other things, that authorities and other public sector actors make their websites compliant with accessibility requirements. Yet the university's digital platform, which was intended to allow students to register for courses and comprehensively manage their own studies, was almost impossible for persons with visual impairments to use. And so this incident raises several questions. The first is, what measures are being taken to ensure the removal of barriers to universities and other programs of post-secondary education, such as vocational schools, for students and prospective students with disabilities? What remedial recourses exist for students with disabilities who experience barriers in access within the post-secondary education context? For example, is there a process for making complaints? I'd also like to know whether there's an independent oversight mechanism for post-secondary educational institutions, such as an ombudsman dedicated to education. Finally, what training and reasonable accommodation exists for teaching staff and faculty? And my very last question, in fact, is what happened in this case, in this University of Helsinki case? Was the website issue resolved? And this issue is particularly important, as my understanding is that this digital platform is to be extended to the vast majority of universities in Finland. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Amalia Camillo. You have the floor.
Gracias.
Thank you, Chairperson, and my thanks also to the delegation for their answers. I want to put a question about Article 21. On the 5th of June this year, 2025, a truth and reconciliation process was begun for deaf persons and sign language users. This is, I'm sure, the first of its kind in the world. I'd like to know how that process is going, and above all, if there is participation from and by deaf people in that process. Thank you.
So much, Mr. Magino Lorenzo, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Chair. Your Excellency. Yesterday, I asked a question about people with Down syndrome in Finland in connection with discrimination that they suffer. And I don't believe I had an answer to that question. I also mentioned or asked whether or not there was any government plan in place to support the generational exchange of knowledge by and for leaders of persons with disabilities. In your statement yesterday, we heard about the weaknesses that exist within the DPO movement. And I think it's very important that organizations of persons with disabilities be strengthened. With regards the question of the participation of persons with disabilities in the multidisciplinary committee, I'd like to refer specifically to whether or not persons with disabilities are incorporated in the professional teams deciding on which services and support are provided in communities. If, of course, such multidisciplinary teams exist, I'm talking about designated professionals. So I'd like to know whether or not they are in those groups, if they exist. And there was also a question about rehabilitation. The same question goes for that, really, whether or not persons with disabilities are included in teams and the teams providing oversight of that process, and whether or not they're really present on the ground, and whether or not their opinion is voiced when decisions are being made and analyses are being carried out and reports are being made concerning the strengths and weaknesses of the system. Your Excellency, the term special services comes up fairly frequently, and this is something which brings to mind the prior medical service system in terms of the services being provided, for example, in municipalities at town hall level. I wonder what services are really being provided and you have in mind when you talk about these special services. It's a term which brings to mind the former old health models, and also a slightly false publication advertising, and for example, supermarkets use this term special in order to sidestep realities quite often and cover up realities. So it can be a term which is rather deceptive, and often the models that are being provided under the auspices of those terms don't really comply with the standards we want to see. So I'm interested to learn about that. And finally, I'd like to turn to the matter of suicide in persons with disabilities and why exactly, oh, sorry, correction, turn to the matter of blind people within persons with disabilities. We're seeing suicide increase among blind persons, in particularly as a group within persons with disabilities. And I'd like to learn about any comparative statistics you have comparing suicide rates in persons with disabilities versus those without disabilities. Thank you, says the chair. Madam Donders, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I have a question under Article 24. In the list of issues raised by the committee before, we want to know the number of children studying in the schools desegregated by age, location, and including the type of impairment. And you replied that you do not have statistics on the number of children with disabilities studying in the school desegregated by type of impairment. So relating this, my question is, it means that the state party doesn't have any statistics on the children with disabilities studying in the education disaggregated by a type of impairment. If it's so, why are you reacting not having such kind of clear statistics? Because if we see the general comment number 4, it promotes for having the statistics on data of children with disabilities disaggregated by type of impairment. I would like to know your reaction on that. And second question under the article is, yes, when I look at your state report, you say that children with disabilities have been provided needed support in the education. So to what extent the state party has taken the monitoring and the evaluation to identify whether children with disabilities being provided needed support, whether they have received the quality education. So if you conduct such kind of monitoring, to what extent organizational persons with disabilities are being involved in that monitoring? So my last question is related to the Article 29. Also on the list of issues, we want to know number of persons with disabilities who hold decision-making positions or who hold the public positions, but you said you do not have statistics on that area. So regarding this, my question is whether a state party has any measures to encourage persons with disabilities to extend for the election at the national and local level, and to hold them in the public positions like the government, etc. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Christopher Nauro. You have the floor.
Distinguished delegation, I want to look at Article 25 about health, especially the challenges being faced by people with disabilities when they are looking for good services or qualitative health. I observed that sometimes the health technician or service providers are not well trained when it comes to certain challenges being faced by people with disabilities. Let's take, for instance, the blind and deaf, and those who are deaf alone, and other people with disabilities. I want to ask, is there any mechanism put in place to ensure that doctors and other paramedics goes into regular training or periodic training to ensure how to handle these persons when they come to looking for good health services? Another one is that in most cases too, we observe that like deaf people going to the hospital, sometimes they don't have sign language interpreters. The doctors are not trained, they don't know how to communicate with these persons. So is there any measure put in place that enables these doctors to interact to ensure that what the person, like a deaf person, is trying to explain to them is being understood, and at the end of the day, they'll go back happy, having the good services they require? These are my two questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ms. Gatul-Popome, you have the floor.
Chair, and thank you, delegation. My first question was on Education 24. Learners who are deafblind remain one of the marginalized groups, and it affects their education. Could you please update us the situation of learners with deafblindness in Finland? What opportunities and services are available to support them for quality education? Then the next one is on 27 on work and employment. So Takanova Limited was closed down, and may we be advised or updated whether the workers who were there had support in transitioning into open labor markets? In a similar vein, what opportunities are there if there are still shelter workshops remaining to enable the people to transition to open labor market? Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Rehab Mosley, you have the floor.
شكرا سيدة الرئيسة وشكرا لوفد فنلندا.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I'm grateful to the members of the Finnish delegation. I have a question under Article 27, employment and access to employment. You explained that you are working towards the facilitation of access to the labour market and to increase the rate of persons with disabilities in the labour market. You also highlighted the fact that you have around 25 measures in place to increase the rate of persons with disabilities in the employment market. You stated that there is an increase in the rate, but the rate that you've shared doesn't correspond to the statistics that we've seen. There are issues, I think, at municipality level, and the rates that we're seeing don't there incorporate persons with disabilities. So my question is the following: what positive measures are being put in place to change stereotypes and mentalities connected to those suffering from mental disability and to allow those with that type of disability to have meaningful increased access to opportunities and the labour market, regardless of the region they live in the country. Thank you.
I'll give the floor back to the task force member, Ms. Natalia Guala, to give the question. And this segment will be closed 12:35.
Muchas gracias, Presidente.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I wanted to add a question regarding Article 28. So that's social security and social protection and an adequate standard of living of persons with disabilities. Once again, according to the data we have available on the official EU statistics website, Finland's GDP grew by 14% between 2018 and 2023 and is above the European average. It's also estimated, according to data from Statistics Finland, that 25% of persons with disabilities are at risk of poverty or exclusion. Now, we've heard that because of budget cuts, budgets being reallocated and posts are being cut, particularly in the sphere of services to persons with disabilities and social welfare services. In that light, I'd like to ask the delegation whether or not the state party has information concerning what percentage of tax revenue is allocated to services for persons with disabilities on the one hand, and whether or not you have any information concerning the impact of existing budget cuts on persons with disabilities, and in particular those who, as we were saying, are at risk of exclusion and poverty. And whether or not in the case of the Welfare Institute, what follow-up is being given to the recently implemented measures brought in by the new regulation, and whether or not you're going to incorporate indicators to connect budgetary allocation, both in terms of tax revenue and other budgetary sources, and the connection and impact they have on budget being allocated to disability support services, whether or not that's something that's going to be studied and incorporated. And finally, I'd like to ask the delegation a question about the situation of persons with disabilities in Allen who have been transferred to disability support services or institutions in Sweden and have lost their social support services that they enjoy as Finnish nationals or residents because they've been moved out of the national territory, and what measures are being taken in Sweden to provide equivalent social welfare support, and what measures are being adopted to deal with the specific situation of those people who, furthermore, sometimes have been moved against their will in terms of linguistic and cultural support as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Excellency, you have the floor. The time is limited, so please answer all the questions if you couldn't answer in writing to the committee. You have floor.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. I will start with the capacity of so-called disability councils. Finnish legislation defines there must be council for persons with disabilities for municipalities and well-being services counties. Council can also be a combined one for a larger area. Ministries have worked in cooperation with regional and local authorities. A cooperation network led by Foundation Sitra, and this network is working with problems found and to help different bodies, for instance, youth, elderly persons with disabilities and their councils to cooperate better. This has been very important under this early implementation phase of regional and local reforms. Because the local and regional authorities are also struggling to find balance in their tight economy, it is not always easy to make fine-tuning of the whole decision-making process. Some areas might even lack personal capacities to act. This has been quite a complicated field to have guidance by the state, because municipalities and counties are autonomous, and state guidance has been taking a form and very much concentrated on finance side. However, there are initiatives to use more citizen and user panels to develop services more citizen need oriented and to answer the need to find solutions to the problems perceived more swiftly. Now, colleagues, we have a bunch of questions here and time is very, very limited. And on my list, first I have Ministry of Justice to be followed by Education and Culture, then Social Affairs and Health to be followed by Economic Affairs and Employment. And if there are any other colleagues wishing to intervene, so please take your floor after that. So Ministry of Justice first.
Thank you. On the truth and reconciliation process for the deaf and sign language users, indeed, the work has begun in June when a steering group that consists of both representatives of government officials and representatives of the deaf and sign language communities started its work. And during the process, of course, the participation of the community is extremely important, and participants will also be offered psychosocial support during the process. But unfortunately, I don't have any updates on the actual work because the Secretariat will only begin its work in September. There has been a bit of a delay in the recruitment process. As I understand, the cause is security vetting that is done for all ministry employees, and this takes several weeks. So that is why the Secretariat is only now going to start its work. So we will hopefully be able to provide you with updates at a later date. Then shortly going back to working life, the Non-Discrimination Act requires that employers assess and promote non-discrimination in their operations, and this also includes recruitment processes. Also, the Non-Discrimination Act requires employers to make reasonable accommodations where in the assessment of reasonable accommodations, the needs of the person with disabilities is the primary consideration. And also the law allows for positive discrimination in certain cases. And now the Ministry of Social Affairs and Health.
Thank you. There were a lot of questions falling within the Ministry of Social Affairs and Health. I start with the tax revenue to services for persons with disabilities. The overall budget for social welfare sector is 9.9 billion euros, and for services for persons with disabilities, the allocation is 2.8 billion euros. Then going back to the beginning of the questions, there was a question about the promotion of health and well-being. This is a duty of the well-being service counties, and they play an important role in coordinating the promotion of health and well-being in their areas. And the promotion of health and well-being is a part of a organization and the provision of the services. And the counties must promote the well-being and health for their residents. And the primary responsibility for promoting this is insofar that this task is linked to other statutory duties of the well-being service counties. One of the objects of the health and social service reform was to reduce the inequalities in health and well-being and to curb the growth and the costs. And in cooperation between well-being service counties and municipalities, the focus is on promoting health and well-being, which reduces the need for healthcare and social welfare. And people's quality of life improves, and various factors of well-being, such as living conditions, employment and working conditions, livelihood, social relations, self-fulfillment, happiness and social capital can grow. And this may also reduce inequalities in health and well-being between different groups of people. So the well-being service counties has this duty to offer a promotion of health and well-being also for persons with disabilities. Then there was a question regarding the suicide of blind people. As far as I'm aware of, we do not have registration from which we could see this kind of information and assess whether the person committing a suicide was a person with disabilities. Regarding the healthcare professionals and how they interact with the patients who have disabilities, again, our Act on the Rights and Status of the Patient requires the healthcare professionals to treat the patients so that their human dignity is respected, and to give them the information so that the patient can understand the information. And this also means that interpretation must be provided if needed. There were also questions regarding the employment. So basically, in that regard, from the social services viewpoint, the work activities and work coaching of persons with intellectual disabilities are carried out in most municipalities, either fully or mostly in work and day centers or workshops, and individual coaching or guidance, group activities and assessment of work ability or functional capacity are offered in work activities. And in practice, the work activities of persons with intellectual disabilities at work and daycare centers have often remained in a permanent solutions. And in recent years, several reforms and projects relating the organization of employment promoting activities and work activities have been implemented. And in the work ability program projects, and as a follow-up to them, modeled effective services for promoting employment also for persons with disabilities and persons with intellectual disabilities. And these include quality-based job coaching, in which the job coach assists the client in learning skills related to work life, finding a job, learning work tasks, and starting a working life. And development work has been carried out as a part of a normal activities of well-being service counties and organizations. Work coaching related to services and work coaching based on quality criteria piloted in the work ability program are already implemented to some extent in practice. And regarding the questions on social security, I will start with the question on Sweden. As I stated already before, we are aware of the situation which in practice concerns the Åland Island, and the fact that some of the residents of Finland residing in Åland Island have sent to Sweden to receive a care. So this is an ongoing situation, and we are having discussions in this regard. And I will pass the floor to Ministry of Education so they can disclose some information there. Thank you.
Delegation, we have only 1 minute left.
Okay, I'll I'll take one question. I had plenty of questions, but the clear and fast answer can be given to the question about statistics. In Finland, education providers are not allowed to collect health data on pupils, and access to support must not be based on any diagnosis. So we don't have a very clear data about different kind of impairments. But in 2024, there were a total of 3,075 pupils in special schools at the basic education level. So this gives some kind of a amount of pupils in segregated systems. We have about 6,100 pupils in basic education at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Please answer all the questions you couldn't answer in this time in writing to the committee. Now I give the floor to the representative of the Finnish National Human Rights Commission for closing remark. I would like to remind you that your statement should not exclude 3 minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Madam Chair, distinguished members of the committee, colleagues and friends. We wish to reiterate some of the concerns we voiced earlier and comment on some of the responses made by the representatives of the government. As we stated yesterday, there are clear setbacks in the realization of the rights of persons with disabilities in Finland. Contrary to the position held by the government, we are convinced that one of the main reasons for the latest revision on the scope of application of the Disability Services Act was the foreseeable costs incurred by the service needs of oldest age groups, and this can be seen, for example, in the legislative draft on page 5. As stated on the draft itself, there will be negative consequences for older persons with disabilities who will not be granted disability services. Home-based services and housing services based on the Social Services Act will not meet their needs. Furthermore, in recent years, access to essential services such as informal care support, home care, and 24-hour assisted living has declined, even as the older population has grown. As services have narrowed to basic and medical care, other needs, including social participation, cognitive support, household tasks, errands, and outdoor activities are often left unmet. We also want to rectify some information presented here yesterday regarding our own resources. It was stated that the additional positions granted by the Parliament in 2019 to the Finnish National Human Rights Institution were assigned to work on international human rights conventions, and that this would also benefit the independent monitoring mechanism of the CRPD. In reality, they were specifically assigned to work on the rights of older persons due to national crises in care services for older persons. They were not meant for the IMM. As stated here yesterday, in autumn 2024, the Ministry of Social Affairs and Health did appoint a follow-up group on strengthening the self-determination of clients and patients. And this was made in accordance with the government program. However, we wish to stress that shortly after this, the government decided that no resources would be allocated to the group. Therefore, the group cannot draft in and advance a legislative proposal. The Human Rights Center considers the government's responses to the rapid and severe weakening of the operating conditions of civil society organizations as insufficient. A government representative stated that the cuts to NGO funding were necessary to balance the economy and to ensure that organizations could operate autonomously with private funding. We want to underline that the speed and unpredictability of the cuts effectively prevent controlled reorganization of civil society organizations. Austerity measures combined with lack of promotional policies deteriorate the status of rights of persons with disabilities in Finland. We feel that the government representatives have not convinced us that things are getting any better, but have settled in repeating the political arguments that have been used to justify shortcomings in, for example, social services, situations of organizations of persons with disabilities, and social security and employment. Thank you. We are very much looking forward to the committee's recommendations.
Thank you so much. On behalf of the committee, I thank the representative of the Finnish National Human Rights Institution for your closing remark. Now, I give the floor to the distinguished head of the delegation on Finland for her closing remark. You have the floor.
Madam Chairperson, distinguished members of the committee, on behalf of the Finnish delegation, I would like to sincerely thank you for this constructive and very meaningful dialogue we have had. We greatly appreciate the committee's thorough engagement and the depth of your questions, including those that have not been that easy. These exchanges provide important guidance and prompt us to reflect critically on our progress and the challenges that remain. Our dialogue with you will continue to resonate beyond this session. We will take time at home to carefully reflect on your remarks and observations shared with us. We look forward to receiving the committee's concluding observations. They will be translated into our national languages, Finnish and Swedish. An easy-to-read version will be made available, and concluding observations will be disseminated widely. They will be made publicly available also through our database of human rights recommendations. The concluding observations will be presented to the government's network on fundamental and human rights later this autumn. And I can also assure you that the committee's recommendations will be discussed in a variety of fora and by a broad range of actors in the months ahead. Madam Chairperson, distinguished members, allow me once again thank you for your engagement, for your expertise, and for your unwavering commitment to the promotion and protection of the rights of persons with disabilities. I thank you.
On behalf of the committee, I thank you, Your Excellency, for your closing remark and also all the support. Now, I give the floor to Ms. Natalia Guala, the task force for Finland, for her closing remark. I would like to remind you have your statement not exclude 5 minutes. Thank you so much.
Excelentísima jefa de delegación, distinguidas
Distinguished head of delegation and representatives of the delegation of Finland, we would like to sincerely thank you for being present here for this constructive dialogue and for your involvement in this whole process of the review of the State Party. As you know, it is this committee's intention to contribute to each of the state's efforts in implementing the rights in the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Through these constructive dialogues, we're able to become aware of the progress that each country is making in the implementation of the Convention, to identify pending challenges, as well as policies and regulations that need to be harmonized with the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. But ultimately, these constructive dialogues allow us to offer, in this case to Finland, through our concluding observations, to offer recommendations in order to attain the highest possible standards to ensure the enjoyment of the human rights of persons with disabilities in Finland. We in the task force and in the committee as a whole appreciate your honest, candid replies and all the information that you have provided during this constructive dialogue, and we look forward to additional replies in writing. We would also like to acknowledge the presence of the independent monitoring mechanism and of course, the active participation of persons with disabilities in Finland throughout the whole review process of the state party. Once again, we would like to draw the state party's attention to ensure that all measures, all legislative amendments, all budgetary allocations, and the recently approved policies continue to strive to implement the Convention in order to secure the rights of persons with disabilities so that they can fully enjoy their rights and under no circumstances to allow retrogression. We would like to reiterate our concern over any potential setbacks in these measures, and we would like to encourage the state party to closely follow up to ensure the full enjoyment of the human rights of persons with disabilities so that the country can continue to make progress in this area. The committee will look forward to any and all additional information that you can provide in future reports and regarding the impact studies of the recently adopted policies by the state party. Any and all findings that you can provide regarding the implementation of these measures will be useful, not just for this committee, but to all interested parties, not least the organizations of persons with disabilities. Rest assured that you can count on this committee, not just when it comes to making periodic recommendations, but to assist you in progressively continuing to make progress in the implementation of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities in Finland, to have a fair, inclusive society for all persons with disabilities, so that you can have that happy society that the delegation mentioned yesterday, one where no one is left behind. Thank you.
Thank you so much. On behalf of the committee, I thank the delegation for the constructive dialogue with the committee, which has provided further insight into the situation of the persons with disability in your country. The committee recommends the state party for its effort and would encourage it to take all necessary measures to address the various recommendations of the committee, which will be formally communicated to you through the permanent mission for purpose of a more comprehensive implementation of the provision of the convention throughout the territory of the state party for the benefit of persons with disability in your country. The committee also reminds the state party that it select a number of the recommendations for immediate follow-up. These are mentioned at the end of the concluding observation. It invites the state party to pay particular attention to these selected recommendations. The committee will reconvene this afternoon at 3 p.m. in this room. This meeting is adjourned. And I would like to invite the Secretary Office to announcement some schedule today.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and congratulations to the delegation of Finland and the task force as well. So announcement for the afternoon at beginning at 1:30 in room 1008 is the meeting of the working group on the institutionalization. You are very welcome to attend in the afternoon. As per a request from the chair, a slot has been allocated to the discussion of funding. So, I mean, we will review that in a short period. Then we will proceed with the Kiribati adoption of list of, Kiribati concluding observations, and then a paper, a concept note on the activities of the 20th anniversary will be circulated by to all members of the committee around 2 p.m. And the chair of the committee would like to initiate a discussion on this 20th anniversary of the convention, if time allows, of course, if the adoption is finalized. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much.
you.